Hey, it's Russ Baden with Roleplaying Public Radio. This is RPPR episode 174, Skills in RPGs. And with me is Caleb.
Yep.
I
am indeed here.
You are indeed here. Because this episode we're going to be talking about the role of skills in RPGs, from the old school, proficiency systems in D&D to newer implementations to RPGs that don't have skills at all, like Powered by the Apocalypse games, because they don't have them.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the good, the bad, what we like about various skill systems, what we don't, all of that kind of fun stuff. So a bit of news first. So as I've mentioned before, Burke and I are launching a music review podcast called Night Clerk Radio, Haunted Music Reviews. And by the time this episode is posted, our website should be live.
Wait, is the music review haunted, or are you reviewing haunted music?
Haunted music.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we might be haunted too. I mean, technically we're all haunted by the past.
Of reviews, apparently.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll have the website up with a trailer, sort of little 2-minute preview about what our podcast is going to be about, and we should be launching before the end of February with 3 episodes. And I'm looking forward to it. So if you want to hear about vaporwave, dark ambient, dungeon synth, and mallsoft, and vapor trap, and all kinds of music subgenres you've never heard of or maybe heard of and are terrified or confused by, then Burke and I will help elucidate about it.
I have listened to a couple episodes.
Mm-hmm.
You guys actually know what you're talking about in this stuff, which is very un-RPPR in terms of preparation.
Wow.
I plan to insinuate myself on some episodes just to bring the tone down a bit.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You're getting a little too full of yourselves with your,
that's...
your highfalutin book learning and vocabulary. And
I was about to get a V-neck shirt and some tattoos.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in there and be like, I like the part that went wow, 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 wow.
Yes.
And that'll be my contribution, as usual.
I mean, it's a good contribution. I mean,
yeah, people just get a little too chummy in there. Got to lower the tone.
We actually will have we will have guests every once in a while. So and Kale will be our first guest. And it'll be the most Caleb and Ross album that we talk about on that episode, but that'll be a surprise for the future. But yeah, so let's just get into it, because I want to talk about skills in RPGs.
Okay.
So, after our last episode on Alien the RPG, I was really struck by the fact that they have 12 skills in the game, and that's it. And that covers the totality of what you can do in the Alien RPG. But they are interestingly implemented, because every single skill had several stunts to describe what you could do if you succeed very well in a role, how you could improve results. So I thought I really liked, this is sort of something I've only seen in RPGs in the last couple of years, like maybe 5 or 6 years. This kind of like simplified but elegant. It's not rules light, because the Alien RPG has got enough crunch. You can't really call it rules light, but like it's, comparing games from way back in the day when D&D grudgingly added proficiencies, to, I don't know if you're familiar with those, but those were, they were kind of tacked on as an afterthought, but that's most of D&D systems back in the day. To stuff like in the 90s, the GURPS, let's have 300 skills and
our different climbing down and climbing up skills.
Well, that's Palladium.
That's my favorite.
That's Palladium, and that's a percentile system. And
I think we're correcting from the justified sprint away from simulation as gaming, which I agree we should run away from that. But I also think we're far enough and developed enough in the indie space now that we've sort of gone too far in the other direction into games that are like that fucking joke tweet, like gumption, cut of your jib, a certain je ne sais quoi, like a fake core game where it's just like I do it with a sheer wanting to, yeah, exactly. Like it's it gets a little loosey goosey abstract. And I'm not saying that's bad, but like I think that is also left a sour taste in some people's mouths, or like left people lacking in an experience. And so I think you're getting like stuff like a pared down skill system that is more elegant with the 12 skills. Do they have specializations? I haven't read the book yet.
Not an Alien, no.
Yeah, see, like that's how I got around it in Red Markets. I pared the skills down a little, but I'm like, okay, if you want to
The fill in the blank option.
Yeah. If you want to learn how to fire a howitzer, maybe that's a special shoot skill. Like, but some people aren't even doing that anymore, which I think is fine depending on like the level of game you're going to run. Like from what I've heard about Alien runs, I don't think you have to worry about running into a campaign where you're going to need that many special skills because, you know, there'll be xenomorphs eventually and then you're all going to die.
I mean, a lot of like skills in RPGs, it comes down to expectations of like what your game should be about. And like back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, it was like, this is this, like you mentioned, the simulationist view, which is this is the engine to run your reality. And it can encompass all things within this very broad category, like fantasy. So the D&D Third Ed is a fantasy simulation engine, and you can do anything within that.
Yeah. Also moving away from that whole like grand unified theory of RPGs, like, where people are just, my game does this one thing.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
And being okay with that, which is a more recent development.
Yeah, it's like the focus, not even a genre thing, but like we're gonna do heists in not Dishonored. You know? Like Blades in the Dark. Yeah,
and necessary because. Yeah, you can't. That whole 12 skill thing, I don't think it works if you're doing like a system like that is supposed to be in multiple settings. Like, like what's my magic skill? Is it heavy machinery? Like, you know, that kind of stuff.
Don't run D&D in the Alien RPG.
Yeah, so and more people are finally not doing that. Thank God.
Well, they're doing the opposite, which is still. I mean, well, they've always done this, taking D&D and trying to make it do everything else.
Yeah, well. People will be fools regardless. But yeah, I think the it's really a comfort with abstraction, and I think it's also like a discomfort with certain amount of abstraction because like at this point in the indie space, you can get as abstract you want. Like it's. I mean, Baron Munchausen looks like rules heavy compared to certain RPGs that are out there now. It's like so. I think it's really looking for a middle ground in the Venn diagram. But like also those 80s RPGs, a lot of it wasn't simulation. It was fucking gamist, like people who just wanted to power game. Like a lot of those rules weren't there to simulate anything. Like
there is this idea, like the thing that I became aware of when I was learning D&D Third Ed, which is the trap option conundrum, which is the idea is that you present a number of things to a player, and some of them are bad. Like you're going to make an inferior character, one who's not as powerful as other characters if they choose this. Like in D&D, if you choose the toughness feat, you get +3 hit points. Whereas if you choose this feat, you'll like kill your enemy faster, or you'll cast a more powerful spell. But you have those 3 extra hit points, which 3 extra hit points is nothing, even at level 1.
The Dark Souls ring that does nothing. Like,
exactly.
That kind of stuff.
So like, the question is, the game designer, do you make a game where everyone can make what level of system mastery are you expecting of your player?
Yeah.
So,
but also like, I think it's also in there like exploits, like people are including, well, if I take this, this, and this, I can do 18 attacks per round. And and that was also a deeply 80s gaming kind of thing. And like making these horribly min-maxed characters. But like that used to be the fun of RPGs for a lot of people. And it still is for some, but I think another thing in the 80s, I think the hobby has matured.
Oh, well, yeah.
And that's where we get the elegant skill systems we're seeing today.
I think another common thing that led to this was sort of like the credentialism and sort of, and it's still there, but like the CV resume thing of like 80s games. Yeah. Where like games like Traveler and Twilight 2000. Are you familiar with those?
Yeah, you're trying to build up your character's past history in numbers, not narrative.
Well, you served 4 years in this thing and you gain these skills, and so it's like, it reads like a resume.
You can die in character creation,
right? But like, if you survive, you gain, like, you min-max your thing by having a very varied career, and like you can like literally write his resume. And I mean, it certainly shows, like, I think, the idea that if you have these sort of like certifications where your character is just more powerful than someone else, you know, who has maybe inherent potential but not like that training. So like it says a lot about what you expect of the genre. And like, I mean, that's Traveler's like military / hard sci-fi, where like, of course everyone's going to be like a NASA from future NASA or future, you know, Air Force or Space Force or whatever. And so of course they're going to be better than someone who doesn't have the best training and the best connections and that kind of thing. That's just how it is. You know, if you're not Buzz Aldrin, you ain't shit, or Chuck Yeager, you ain't shit. You know, that. I don't know. Like, do you feel like those kind of games still have a place today, or do you feel like
the dozens and hundreds of skills?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like, maybe if your setting demands it. So, like, one game I kind of forgive it in is like Eclipse Phase, and in second edition particularly. Like, so first edition Eclipse Phase. Like, I remember playing long terms of it. It was like, what the fuck's the difference between impersonate and disguise? Like,
oh yeah,
am I doing an impression of someone while not wearing costume? And that's a different skill. Like, and that stuff was never clearly explained, and there were some redundancies in it. I think that's fixed a lot. In the second edition. However, there's still a shit ton of skills, but it's because like Eclipse Phase as a setting is enormous. Like, you could be swimming on the Europa, or you could end up like
on a planet outside the galaxy.
Yeah, parkouring through Mars, or you could end up like doing a Stargate kind of thing, and like that could be one campaign with different bodies the entire time. So like, I think you need a setting as varied enough to justify your skill number.
Yeah.
Because like, what are you going to be doing in it? I also think the Apocalypse world is interesting because like, you're obviously designing your character to do specific things because you have a focus in mind. So just make those the moves, and then anything else you abstract to an attribute test. Yeah. Which I think is, I prefer to Fate, because at least there's more niche protection, because Fate, if you can talk your way around.
Or if you have enough fate points to burn.
Yeah, if you got enough fate points, or you can talk your way around to like, oh yeah, that's an aspect. And like convince their DM you can get away with fucking anything. So I don't know. I think it's a comfort with abstraction and narrative, but understanding that even abstraction has its limits. And,
I mean, I can see the. I think I will hazard a guess about like their intent for first edition Eclipse Phase. The idea that impersonating someone is such a powerful ability in Eclipse Phase, they wanted to make it harder for the character to be good at it. You know what I mean? Like maybe, and that's the thing, like how useful should every skill be? Like what is a skill specifically? Like in first ed, they, and I think they still do in second ed, having run, a lot of sessions of it. They still have free fall versus like athletics, which is like free fall is zero microgravity. And like athletics is with gravity, in terms of maneuvering your characters. And should that just be one skill, or like, is that sufficiently different? Like, I mean,
see, I get that because, it is saying something about your character's past. But I mean, like, and obviously how powerful is every skill in the setting. I also get that as well. But ultimately, the most powerful skill in any setting is lie.
This is your, I mean, I've seen
this is not me. Yeah. This is an absolute truth amongst all RPG gaming. Like, you can do more with a lie than you could do with any combat skill. And I will... Unless there's a setting in which like talking is not allowed, which I assume is 40K. Because
actually, you can talk at 40K.
It's heresy.
Do you want to play some more?
Not murdering something, but unless it is a we merely kill RPG, the ability to lie is the superpower. In pretty much every RPG.
Being able, because it comes down to characters, like,
because then you have whatever skills the NPCs you're manipulating have. Like, it's a force multiplier.
It's mind control. It's not mind control. I think for me, there's certain skills that are more prominent. Like, what is your game primarily about? And like in Aliens, they just boiled it down to 12 skills and said these are what the game is about, and that's it. But other RPGs will have like a more varied skill set, because like in some cases, I think in Eclipse Phase second edition, it's because they want to be it's sci-fi, but like there's multiple types. They specifically say there's 3 campaign archetypes. You could be gatecrashers, you can be firewall. Gatecrashers are the Stargate thing, and firewall is the secret agents thing, and then criminal. You can be space, criminals, and not all those skills that's a Venn diagram. It's not a circle. Like there's some skills that aren't, and so you need a broad skill list. But I mean, a lot of RPGs though, I think their skill lists are still sort of controlled to a degree by legacy, and like Delta Green is still beholden to Call of Cthulhu because there's still a fucking ride skill in it. And it's, I mean, maybe in a 1920s Cthulhu game, you could justify the ability to ride a horse, but I would like to see a justified, True Detective crossover, but I don't
I wonder what my ride skill is in real life. life.
Well, according to Delta Green, it's 10%.
No, I've taken lessons though.
Okay.
So, but I remember almost nothing, and I hated every second of it. So
Okay. Well, you might have.
I'm wondering if that's like a 20 or like a 12.
I think it's like add a 1d10% to your base, so like it's somewhere between 11 and 20%.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
all right.
So
I'll take that.
Yeah, it's better than me. I've never ridden a horse. So, yeah. And of course, because you have that means you can ride a horse under normal circumstances without making a skill check. You can just get on a horse and just go. It's just when you're being shot at, you have to make your skill test.
Yeah.
So you'll die then.
Yeah.
But going back to what you were talking about with, rhetoric or like lying and stuff like that. Of course, this is back a classic RPPR thing for us is talking about, social skills being mind control, which is something we dealt with a long time ago. And the idea is like, should your character be as talented as, you are in terms of rhetoric? And for me, I mean, my delineations between player characters and non-player characters. So like, you can be, a social klutz in real life and still be a very suave character, against NPCs if you have high social skills, because you also can't, cast fireball spells or, pilot a giant robot. But yeah, my line is against other player characters because they still have agency as players because it's a game and a social contract.
Well, I think everyone agrees with that.
No, they don't.
I mean, everyone should agree with that, and the other people are wrong. For me, when it gets to rhetoric skills, and what I find interesting in a lot of games nowadays, not even having a lie check, not even having a deception skill, or any kind of that, in the way that it used to be in the 80s, just be like, how good you look determines everything about your level of persuasiveness, which I'm also not for, but also leaving it out. Cause like, I also kind of do like that, because I've always said that there is a hard limit on how much you can abstract a rhetorical skill in a game about talking to each other. Because, if you have a 99 percentile in lie and you go in, it's like, I lied to him. And the GM's like, what? I lie lies about things that aren't true to get what I want. I was like, okay, what are those things?
Yeah.
Lying things. And like, okay, you're ruining story at that point. Like,
well, that's actually a pretty good analogy. I defeat the enemy in combat. How?
Yeah, which is terrible.
With
like,
defeating
which is bad. Yeah, which is bad storytelling. Like it is, my hit points do no damage to your hit points. Like, you can mock how stupid my fucking wound tables are in red markets, and I completely understand that it's deeply 80s. But it's like, as a DM, I fucking hate when like my numbers hit your numbers and numbers go off, because like, God, that's bad storytelling. Like, yes, everyone gets shot in the legs. I know it's ridiculous in red markets, but at least they got shot somewhere, and you can role play, fuck my knee, like, and say something about that. Because I hate it when it's just like, yeah, the numbers are less than they were. Yeah, it's just, it's not. And with rhetoric, I think it becomes like not just annoying; it becomes like game breaking.
Yeah.
Like, when somebody's like, I am the moon, and you have to like, well,
that's a specific lie.
Yes, at least there's that, but like, it very much like is going to color the world in a way that like people didn't sign up for with the theme, possibly. Like,
sure,
if it becomes that willy nilly and every NPC is that. If
it's a fate game where it's a little larger than life, that can stop. If you're doing a dirty world,
yeah, that would be awful. Like,
even 5/10s would not be enough to convince people you are the moon.
Yes.
Like, it would be impossible to do that. So, I mean, yeah, there is that. I didn't think social skills are obviously important in games, but they're God, yeah. It comes back to like being able to craft narrative as a collaborative thing. Like,
yeah, and I don't want to like actually grade someone's speech before the Senate or something before they roll persuade, but I do want to hear basically what they say rather than just like good speech.
Yeah.
Like, which is not very compelling to me. Yeah.
Like, I think it was like one thing maybe a lot of groups don't do that I've seen a lot before is they aren't very explicit about what they want to happen next. Like they say, I'm going to tell him that Bob stole the guild's money, not me. I'm going to tell him that Bob was the one on watch and he stole the money. And like, but he's really, what the player really wants is not just for Bob to be framed for the crime, but like that Bob's brother, who is also on watch, would be, he like
the Sean issue.
Yeah. Like the idea, like what the player has in their mind isn't being translated. The rest of the table isn't getting it, and there's that disconnect.
They don't work backwards with what they want to happen, and then try and organize a scene to make that happen.
Yeah,
that's an issue that I see quite a bit. The moving backwards. The thing I would like to see put in all role-playing games regarding, if we're going to keep talking about rhetoric skills, is that if we're talking about abstraction, I really like it. And I've basically snuck this into pretty much every game I've run since I've been thinking of it. I really like making the role and then role-playing the role, because there's nothing better as a role-playing challenge than like, oh, fuck, nat 1.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, now you give the nat 1 worthy speech. It gives you more, like, it could be like, all right, what are you trying to do? What's the worst possible version of doing that? Or like, what's you killing it? Or what's you kind of like...
Roll to console the widow.
Yeah.
1. What are you doing tonight?
yeah, fucking get over it.
Yeah. He's dead. And he blew up. We don't even have to bury him.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll save on that.
Yeah, I really like that.
He's already cremated.
Like the first time I did that was in Better Angels, when you guys were like rolling to get candidates to replace a job, and you like would roll like 2 1s. And you're like, I don't believe in that half-angled English for an English teacher. Like, book learning leads to deviltry. Like that stuff is really fun, and like, I know it's extremes, but like it's a more interesting role playing challenge. I really like the idea of like, all right, the purpose of your role playing skill is to abstract it, but once you've abstracted it, you got to go back and make a story out of it. And like, okay, make your role first, and then do what would have accomplished that for the NPCs in the world. Yeah.
And this doesn't just apply to rhetoric too. Like it applies to, there is obviously this whole thing about RPGs about the real world versus the RPG world. And so like, there's a lot of times when there's one person at the table who's better at a technical thing than everybody else. Like, for example, guns. And then like, there's that kind of, you know what I mean? It's like similar.
Yeah, but like there's stuff like techno thrill and monologue and like,
that's the problem is like when you're trying to use this technical skill that your character has and you don't have it, but someone else at the table has it. And like calls you out on it. You know? Like
but I do like the movement making that more on the player side, because that's what a DM has to do. Like that's what I was doing in all, like when I first started DMing and I was like playing stuff like Dirty World, like deeply abstract. I'd still have to describe like, okay, they got a certain amount of success, what does that look like? And I would like describe specific wounds and like stuff like, or like specific facial expressions, or how somebody reacted if they got hit on a certain rhetorical tract, or because that's not in the game, but that's what a DM has to do to like paint a picture. And I really like
sharing the load.
Yeah, I really like it that games are becoming somewhat more explicit. It's like it's your job to describe what that success or failure looks like, and then the DM can add to it. But
don't make the DM have all the cognitive load.
Yes,
but again, that is a good way of helping with that, because, and also when there is sort of a disagreement, don't try and make it like you can't do that because you don't have the tech. You can't. You fucked up your tech. You don't know enough about MP5s to really do a techno thriller monologue about it. Like, so you don't get the benefit. Like, don't do that. Just like, oh, they actually work like this and blah blah blah. Here, then still give them benefit, because like.
But also we have like laws of narrative. Like, go to the Internet Firearms Database. Like, we watched a movie last night where a guy fired fucking 12 shots out of a revolver without reloading. Like. Stories are not typically ruined by like a lack of mechanical verisimilitude. Like it can be pointed out, and it's going to be a definite negative. But like the one guy who like watched Aliens and like, well, that pulse rifle fired this many shots, whereas this pulse rifle rolled for this many shots. So there's an inconsistent level of rounds in the magazine. that guy was never going to enjoy any film, not to like, but movies where the plot doesn't make any fucking sense are always going to be an issue. And like, that's where you get into like rhetorical skills. Like, then you get into idiot plotting. Like the only way this story moves forward is by people being painfully dumb. Like,
like a J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and you're sort of, when you abstract too much on the rhetorical sides of things, I feel like that's what happens in the world. Like the NPCs become so stupid that they don't really paint anything. Yeah.
I mean, for me, so like obviously it's a collaborative thing. If you're the technical expert, don't be a dick about it and have fun. Like in Aliens, by the way, they actually have a thing about ammo that's it's narrative. Like you have enough, you have ammo until you like fail a stress roll.
Perfect.
Then your gun roll. Yeah. So it's very, very narrative.
And that's what I'm talking about. Why skills are getting better because they are learning where to abstract without going too far. Yeah.
But another thing for me that is like what happens when the player character has certain knowledge that would inform their decision making that the player clearly doesn't. So if you're playing your player character is a master general and has maxed out strategy and tactical skills and all this other stuff, and the player's trying to lead a squad of soldiers into battle, and he says, "Well, just charge." And like you're like you as the GM is like, "That's the charge the light brigade." Well, that sounds cool. Let's do that. It's like, no, don't do the charge of the light brigade.
Well, that's a setting mastery thing. Yeah. So like I get it in that case, but in that case you didn't do the assigned reading.
Yeah.
Let your GM come up with something vaguely plausible. Like they can help you out with the abstraction there because you didn't learn about the historical, battle of
or don't charge
12,
a cannon
12. Line. Yeah, exactly like that. Or at least make a justification like they won't see it coming. Like they're poorly trained troops. They'll break, even though it's a dumb idea that I'm gambling on their morale. Like at least something like that. But like, that's what blows my mind is like people don't do the setting research or they miss sessions. And then like the GM's like, well, this would work. And then they just like, no, fuck that.
Yeah.
Gonna do it my way. That won't work. And like,
and then when it doesn't work.
Yeah. It's like, okay. Well, I can invalidate the entire premise of the campaign, or I can tell you it doesn't work like I told you it wasn't going to work, and it didn't work. Like, that's a point where you need to bring in people who did the homework, I guess.
I mean, like what, I guess that's another, what kind of homework is appropriate? I mean, obviously it depends on what kind of game you're trying to run. Like, do you want to, if it's a fun and light game that's, not very realistic or has verisimilitude, maybe not much, but like if you're trying to do like, oh, we're going to do this historical campaign, we're going to do this very in-depth thing, like here's like, what would you feel is appropriate to assign, like to say to players before a game as like, try to know this shit before we start.
Yeah. I don't know. Like the main problem is when there's a disconnect and you're not like, didn't Cody sit in on a game of No Evil one time? Like
the first session.
Yeah. Like, no, it was like the second session.
Oh yeah. And he died in like the first hour.
Cause we'd all read the book at that point and we'd played multiple games of it at that point. And we have
not too many, but yeah.
But like enough to know, like he was like saying, I'm going to use my space ray gun. Like, we don't.
Yeah.
It's not super effective. Like, and they're like, it's hard sci-fi. And then like I'm trying to explain this like deeply lore-based virus I came up with. And he's like, what? What's a cortical stack? And I'm like, fuck. Like that's a point where you have to be like, okay, take the reins, person who did the reading and is up with it. And that's when abstraction can be really good. But, and I hate being like that, like with like stupid lores, like, well, no, actually 10,000 years ago, it was General Blorfus who was part of the
good old Blorfus.
Yeah. Like when you get into like the weeds on that shit, that is also sucks, but, it's also really terrible if, you're playing Night's Black Agent. I use my, spy wristwatch and you're not doing like the 007 version. Yeah. Like, you've ruined the tone by not.
I mean, speaking of Night's Black Agent, I actually, as a thing about verisimilitude, like I watched the Black Widow trailer recently and they have that shot of her going through holding like she has a half dozen passports all with her photo on it, all her fake identities.
Yeah.
And I'm like, even me as a dilettante in the world of espionage, as I've read some books about it, I know that doesn't work anymore. Like biometric technology is so advanced now that you can't like glue a photo to a passport. But the passport has to correspond to something in a computer database somewhere, champ.
Yeah.
Like it's not going to fucking work. They have facial recognition now. And so for me, it's like if a player says, well, I pull out another fake passport. Well, like if this game is set in the here and now, it's like, that's not going to work, champ. What are you going to do? Like,
go into the bilge pump of a like trawler and then escape out onto a dock maybe. Like, it's gotten more low tech. Yeah.
Or hack a computer database.
Yeah,
so
exactly,
like your thing is there. And so for me, that's going to be my problem with running espionage games now is like, it's just like even the fiction that we see in big movies now doesn't match what the reality is in very, very obvious ways. I mean,
and again, I think that's a matter of abstraction. Like, so the one thing I would worry about with the way skills are going, because I think they're way better than they used to be.
Yeah.
Would be, with the level of abstraction and with the amount of work that's being put on the players justifiably to help build the image, it can make maintaining the tone of a game more difficult for the GM. And I know even saying that is heresy because, like, it should be whatever it wants to be. And like, okay, well, I hope you're fine with never running Delta Green again because it's going to turn into a joke.
Yeah.
In a matter of minutes. Like, it's going to be whackety schmackety do comment, like, and that's fine for a couple sessions. But if you want to run like the actual campaign of it, like sometimes
you want to get a true detective mood.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to police the tone to get a tone that you want. And like, that's about player buy-in and session zeros. And I think also people are being great with that. But like, if you skip that step, the abstracted skill direction that we're going in can make it.
Yeah.
It's when your skill is just move good, like, what does that look like? And is that parkour? Is that gymnastics? Is that Batman shit? Is it
perception, alertness, or awareness?
Yeah, exactly. So that's the only downside I see of it. Now, it's not one that is an actual downside because the answer is, Robin laws talk to each other.
Yeah.
But, as we've seen with gamers, that can be an issue.
Yeah. No, that's true. Obviously. But like, for me, another thing that I've been thinking about, the more I think about skills is like, what is a skill as opposed to like an ability or a power or a feat? Because like in terms of like, you look at D&D, like characters have like various categories of things they can do. And like some of them are skills, some of them are feats, and feats are sort of a binary. Either you have it or you don't. You don't have to make a roll to do it. It just, it like modifies something you do, like power attack, and modifies your attack.
Yeah.
Or if it's a spell, it's or a magical ability, it's something you just do. You don't have to like. There's different mechanics for each. Like skills are often like you either don't have to test. Like the standard for skills seem to be if it's a routine task, you don't have to test. If it is something challenging, you have to make some sort of
anyone
test.
dying walking downstairs like Rollmaster?
I got my Rollmaster books in the back. You want to break those buddies out for the maneuver critical failure table?
No.
Yeah. There's a depression critical hit table. Did you know that?
Oh, God. I didn't know it was in that book, but I knew about it deeply.
Did you just roll
personally, on it?
Yes. So, like, that's the thing. Like, how do you categorize as a game designer, as a GM, like, what is a power versus what is a skill? I mean, and obviously to a degree, this is dependent on the genre and the tone you want for your game, but there's some sort of like chemistry. High school chemistry is not a superpower in most times. Yeah,
I think you're communicating with an attribute or something that is like strength dex with that kind of stuff.
Or cool or whatever.
Yeah, you're communicating natural gifts.
Yeah.
With skills, you're communicating trained education, training,
experience,
life experience. You're building a resume, so to speak. But I think from a game design perspective, however you justify it in the setting, whether it's like the morph you're using in Eclipse phase that has a special ability, or it's the
implant,
or it's that, or it's going to be whatever fantasy race bonus you have in a
Dark
D&D,
vision,
that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
I think that is the game designer explicitly communicating niche protection. Like you need, this is the thing that always goes off that you have to invest a lot in, but it will constantly do this bonus or it will do this thing every time.
Yeah.
And I think that very much becomes about niche protection, which is interesting because that's why Apocalypse World games skip skills entirely because everything becomes a feat or a move, but it's specific about character class. Like, I think that's why a lot of people like Apocalypse World, Dungeon World, Blades in the Dark, stuff like
Monster
that.
of the Week
is because niche protection is like unassailable. Like, there's no multi-classing, there's no anything. You have attributes which rarely come into play unless you don't know how else to roll it with a move.
Yeah.
And then you jump over skills entirely and you move straight to it. It's absolute niche protection. It's absolute ensemble casting. So I've always viewed powers and feats as like the game designer communicate. So like in Red Markets, mine is the tough spot.
Yeah.
Like that's your class. Like that's your thing. Like
and what's interesting about the tough
that
spots,
you get a bonus every time and a negative every time, but it's very much like a niche protection. This is your thing. Yeah.
And the tough spots are interesting because you use a variety of game mechanics for them. Some of them are like the one-time bonuses of the brooches.
Yeah.
Some of them are always on passive major modifiers like the latent. And then the other one is like the most interesting one mechanically, I think, is the hustler always succeeding on network checks, but like with the additional cost every session, because like you really use that in Fallen Flag to your advantage.
Oh yeah,
you have to sell everything.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
it's great until they're like, you owe me this many pounds, and you're like, fuck.
yeah,
it's absolutely great, and it absolutely sucks. Yeah. But that's a character in like most post-apocalyptic fiction. The guy who knows somebody, the guy who who
the fixer.
And that would be it. Like,
speaking about this, I realize there's an interesting game design space where we sort of question some of these assumptions. And I'd like to see, for example, imagine like some sort of fantasy RPG where everybody is like the same, like, well, let's say they're all dwarves, and dwarves in D&D like have dark vision. That's just it. They all have it. They all have it 60 feet or 120 feet, whatever it fucking is. What if everyone's a dwarf and dark vision becomes a skill? And so some dwarves are shitty at dark vision. Some of them, like, they have near dark vision, they need their dark glasses to see farther in the dark or whatever. And some of them are just eagle-eyed with their dark vision. And
I play a dwarven optometrist.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's just one way. And like, there's other dwarven traits like being able to tell where secret doors are, and like maybe there's a very like by questioning something that is like, that's an interesting thing as a player, because like a lot of times as a player when I'm playing a game, I psychologically depend on those few things that I know will guaranteed to work. Like if I know that I can succeed on those networking skill checks, or because I have this moxie point or whatever, I can just flip that and I don't have to worry about this. Like I don't have to roll the fucking dice and like possibly fail yet again for the you know what I mean?
Yeah. I know it's like debunked and not true, but like the old Inuit thing, like they have 20 words for snow. Like it's very different if like the Inuit player will always succeed at snow identification versus the all Inuit game where it's like, he's not so great at snow identification.
Yeah.
But she was top of her class in type of snow identification. We will know which ice to walk on and which not to. Like, the gradient changes based on the context of the party.
Yeah.
But I do think those powers and feats and background bonuses and things are almost entirely about trying to communicate a niche protection or like the class structure of the society that the game takes place in. Yeah.
Another thing with skills is also, like I mentioned earlier, trap choices, but like the ones that are just shitty things that you shouldn't pick because you'll weaken your character. But like sometimes players, a lot of games and a lot of players I've seen use some of these as a role-playing thing to be like, well, I chose this skill not because it'll help me, but because I think it's interesting for my character. Like I took an art skill for my D&D fighter because he likes painting landscape paintings. I could have spent it on crafting weapons or survival and been a better, murder hobo, but I want him to be a fucking painter in his spare time.
Sometimes it's built in there by the designers, like Greg Stolze's cobbling role on random character generation in Rain, of which we had 2 master cobblers in our party, and we solved most problems, if at all possible, with shoes. I think that's interesting. Like, I do love a character like David who will min-max some utterly useless skill just to say that there are the best haberdasher in the Five Kingdoms. Yeah.
So do you think more RPGs should like accommodate that, make that easier to do, or make it like? Do you think a game is better if it like makes that a sacrifice, like you make your character less effective at the overall procedural conflict, whether it's investigating or fighting, or do you think that should be like a free thing? Everyone should get some sort of personalization. But if everyone has that personalization, is it really meaningful? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd kind of like to see like what if you did a skill quadrant in the game?
Oh yeah.
So there were two axes. Mm-hmm. There was like useful and useless, mm-hmm. and then there was very good, very bad, and you were only allowed to put certain skills in certain quadrants.
Oh, okay.
So like if you want to be like fucking great at sword fighting, well, that's useful and very good quadrant. But now you're up on that quadrant.
Oh yeah.
So you're going to have to go over to useful and dumb, and that's why you are like the sword fighting cake boss.
Okay.
And then like, oh, you're going to have to put this skill over into useful, and you're shit at it. So mm-hmm. like you also can't do math. Like,
oh wow. That's a really interesting game design solution to that. Yeah, no, I really like that. By making every single skill a choice. Like,
yeah, you got to put it in one of these quadrants.
No, and that actually made me think of something else, because like if you read about experts in a given field, you'll hear like, oh, this guy's the best at this particular aspect of it. But this guy, oh, this person over here, she's really good at this part, you know, mm-hmm. like, but in RPGs, that's often abstracted as just one score. You're just like, if you have an 80% in the skill, you're super good at it. But like, if you go to a conference with all these experts, they're like, oh, that guy's shit at that part, you know, oh, this, you know, like if you go to like antique appraisers, be like, oh, that person's only good at like furniture. This person's good at paintings, you know.
See, I view that as like a tool for GMs to get by, like when mm-hmm. it's like I almost said get off, which is a bad thing for games. But like if a player who's min-maxed and really good at a certain skill fails anyway, mm-hmm. like for me, that's the narrative way mm-hmm. to duck that. It's like, oh well, this is early.
Oh, you need a specialization.
Oh, this is early Aztec, and you know you were having a rough semester.
You're a medievalist.
Yeah, you were having a rough semester that year.
Yeah,
and, yeah. That was not your best.
You fucking read the Necronomicon in Latin. You don't know shit about the Aztecs. You didn't have time.
Exactly. Like that's that's for you. That's your get out of free pass.
Delta Green does have that with the specializations.
Yeah,
but yeah. So some RPGs do have that to a degree, and like you even have that to a degree with Red Market's The Professions. Like for your like howitzers and things like that, but. I don't know. I feel like there's more like that quadrant things could be a way to do that. Like if you break down every skill, like, you know, you have 12 skills, but maybe there's 4 specializations within each, or 4 quadrants for each one. So like,
another thing of those trap skills, some of them there, like specialization is not a good idea in Red Markets for the majority of the time. Cause mm-hmm. like, otherwise, you just take 5 points and shoot, and then you're like good with a crossbow and a Barrett and a cannon.
But you have no emotional capacity.
Laser rifle, but you have no emotional capacity to do anything. And people would do that because I had Tom Church as a playtester. And so what I did was like specializations are like, you want to use a really cool gun? Awesome. You're going to have to buy your shoot skill. Then you're going to have to buy an equivalent number of specialist skill. And you're basically going to be paying double for every skill point you have in it. Mm-hmm. And then that will make you min-max. And if you're fucking great with a Barrett assault rifle, like anti-material rifle, if you're not the dude at the Virginia rally and you're actually good with it and you could, you know, pop a zombie's head off from like 2 kilometers out, that's going to be super fucking useful. I also don't want you to be great at sword fighting too. Yeah. So that's a trap special, mm-hmm. but it's a trap because I want the specialists to be actual specialists, not mm-hmm. min-maxed mutant and mastermind characters who are fucking good at everything. Yeah.
And you also, like in Red Market, say players have to be versatile to a certain degree, because you say you have to pay skill points. You have to choose to be like able to resist emotional trauma. Like,
yes,
you need self-control. Like you have to choose to. If you don't have that, you're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah.
Like, and and some games would just make that an automatic thing. Like Delta Green, you don't have a sanity resisting skill. You just have a sanity attribute.
Well, you got willpower.
Yeah, willpower. Yeah, but that's an attribute. That's not. You can't choose to.
You can spend it though.
Yeah, you can spend it.
They at least do that. Yeah.
Yeah, but see, that's not a skill. That's a resource the character has. Well, you pick, and then of course you have your ablative.
Your
relationships.
ablative family armor.
Yeah.
Strap your children to your mind to block the blows.
Good times. Yeah. But yeah, it's an interesting design space. So I think I agree with you in general that RPGs are in a much better place in terms of skills, like design philosophy, than they were 15 years ago.
Yeah, we live in a golden age.
Yeah, we do. There's a lot of really interesting games coming out, and like for example, I mean, and like you don't even need skills per se. Like for me, I'm like working on Ruin, and there's not going to be like skills because like it doesn't really matter what skills characters have because they're in a weird labyrinth that with its own rules and stuff like that. So like it doesn't matter if you have architecture as a my character's an architecture professor. Well, this isn't normal architecture. You've never studied this. You're starting from ground zero like everyone else. And that's sort of the design philosophy for it. So but yeah, I mean, just in general, do you have any other further advice for people running games in terms of like modifying the skill mechanics for their games? Like if you're running a 5th ed D&D game, would you have any advice for somebody in terms of like, I want my game to be a little, not just a standard game, like I don't know, anything comes to mind?
Just if you're the DM, find a way to describe it.
Yeah.
God, I don't care how.
So focus on the narrative.
I don't care how wackety schmackety do the power is, or if you're using grid combat. But if it's the phasal mind stab of Ithalacor, like, find some way to describe to me what that fucking feels like, looks like. Just don't be
all 5 senses.
Yeah, it doesn't. Just don't do numbers to other numbers. Like, same thing, and especially when it comes to rhetoric and things like that that are actual like communications, because like as much as we would like to abstract everything and like you don't have to actually be a sword fighter to play a sword fighter in a game, you have to actually be able to talk in a game about talking.
Yeah.
So like don't abstract that stuff too much and wonder why the story's dumb.
Yeah.
You need to have, some actual stakes around what people say and choose to do with their actions. So
yeah. I mean, for me, I think, obviously that is really good advice. One thing you can do is maybe like come up with a few house rules to create a few unique skills as options for player characters when they're making them to reflect something unique about it. Like if you're doing a Dark Sun kind of campaign, like, here's the sand riding skill. If you want to be able to be one of the few expert sand gliders who have these basically like hang gliders that can glide over the sand piles. You want to be one of those pilots. You can take that as an option or as a skill or a background or whatever. Or like 2 or 3 other things to like sort of uniquely set your campaign apart. Or one thing you could also do is like make unique skills as a reward for like certain like instead of giving them treasure, be like, the people of this isolated tribe will teach you their forest magic or their forest lore as their reward. Yeah. So like that's another thing. Secret knowledge, that could be a cool thing. But yeah. Skills in RPGs, they're pretty neat. So when we get back, we'll have some shout outs. And we're back. By the way, no anecdotes this week because I've been running a Cliff Space campaign. I'm afraid if any anecdote I give about that would be spoilers for it, so I don't want to ruin the surprise of all the criminal shenanigans they're doing. They're doing space crimes.
And I'm just writing God's Teeth, so y'all heard that already.
Yeah.
Not much to report.
It's going great.
Yeah,
you're getting words down.
Very sad. Yeah. Lots of typing.
Yeah. But anyways, we do have some shout outs. My first one is a book called The Red Thread. It's a book about labyrinths and mazes. It's an excellent book. It is, as I was reading through it, I got about halfway through and I was like, man, this is a really meandering book that just goes from topic to topic without, and it's like, oh, I don't know what I expected. So yeah, if you want to learn more about the mythological, there's a lot about the original, the OG labyrinth in Greek mythology, and Arianid and Theseus and the Minotaur and Crete and all that, and Minos, and also references in England, labyrinths in turf labyrinths in England and all that stuff, and in cathedrals there was a whole thing in the Middle Ages. They just put a labyrinth in the center of the floor of the cathedral. That was the thing. Like, it was just on tile. You could,
okay.
You just follow the pattern.
What was the point of that? Just
meditation. Think about God.
Okay. I thought you meant like actually getting lost, like trying to find the tithing plate. Like,
no,
that doesn't seem optimal.
There were a lot of garden ones in the 17th century, 18th century.
Oh, well, yeah. You had to hunt your servants somewhere.
Well, also,
you can't just have them run around a field. That's too easy.
I think it was more for like, sneaking out with your mistress. But maybe a little both.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you just walk, and the difference between a labyrinth and a maze is a labyrinth only has one path, but a maze is the one that forks, and also they had a really good section about the Garden of Forking Paths, the Borgia story.
Oh yeah,
yeah, it was really good. So, anyways, if you want to learn about labyrinths, read the Red Thread, because labyrinths.
You'll get there eventually.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's exactly it. What's your first shout out, Caleb?
I'm currently reading The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. It's the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale. Mm-hmm. I haven't quite finished it yet, but it's interesting. I don't want to say YA Gilead, but I'm going to. Like, it's a lot simpler in construction than The Handmaid's Tale. Handmaid's Tale, as everyone knows, for a book written in the 80s, is from a single perspective, but it's over multiple timelines because it is meant to be transcripts of tapes hidden inside other tapes. So recording over choral things, and the tapes are unlabeled, so they're in a shoebox. So it's meant to be jumbled and not narratively consistent, as it's a single person's thoughts across multiple timelines. And then there's the famous last chapter, which takes place after the fall of Gilead. And, it's sort of interesting in that they regard Gilead as like this horribly backwards place. But then the historians are just like, well, obviously we can't trust this woman's portrayal of it because, it disagrees with the official records of the known lying plutocrat patriarchs. And like, it's the same sort of misogyny that led to Gilead, but it's, on the left and sort of like liberal look down upon, like, well, she was a simple, uneducated, sex trafficked slave. And so it had a lot of postmodernism and like non-linear storytelling. This one's pretty linear. It's from 3 different perspectives, but the language is much simpler, and the structure of the plot is very simple, much more simple. This time, there's only one large flashback section so far, but it's still very good. But it's a lot simpler to read. Like, as a person who's taught the original book, it is it's a much more simple.
Do you need to read The Handmaid's Tale before you read this?
Oh yes, yes you do. But that's the thing. I also think you could be fine if you'd watch the show.
Okay.
Which I think it might be kind of designed in that way, or at least edited that way. But I'm not certain. But yeah, it's definitely less obtuse than the original book.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see.
But it's still very good. Yeah.
Like, as a comparison, I'm very curious if George R.R. Martin ever releases another Game of Thrones novel, like, if we could tell how influenced it is by the TV show. Like, I mean, there is this whole thing about big novelists being influenced by shows of their own work. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
I'm not sure. It definitely takes as the events of the previous book as writ and connects to it in a lot of more subtle ways. Yeah. So it's not poorly written, but it's much more simply written.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's see here. Next up, I have a video game, Pagan Autonogy. It is a indie game. I saw it listed on a list of 20 weird games that came out in 2019 on Twitter that you should check out. And I looked them up, and that was one of them. It's basically you being put into a dead, abandoned MMO and exploring around. And it's got very sort of like PS1 level graphics, and it's very creepy. It got weird music. And it's very obtuse and mysterious, but I don't know. It's a very much a atmospheric mood type game. It doesn't make sense per se, but like I don't know. I messed around with it a few hours and I enjoyed it. So
I beat Death Stranding last night, and I wouldn't understand anything about that.
Oh wow,
very straightforward.
Yeah,
to the point.
Yeah.
Definitely understood everything.
Are you going to try and 100% that game?
No, I will not.
Are you done with it?
Yes. Oh. Yes, I am. It was good.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Yeah, it makes no sense. I understand the obtuse game.
Feel like Kevin Costner, you're delivering the mail or something.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Man, a Postman game.
Yeah.
Would be real bad.
Just
like a Postman movie.
Oh wow. Huge slam on the Postman.
I'm sorry, Tom Petty. I would join your enclave.
Let's see here. You had another shout out.
I have been reading the new book by Randall Munroe, How To, Absurd Scientific Answers to Everyday Questions. So I've also read his previous books. So Thing Explainer is very cool because they're complex diagrams, but he only uses the top 100 words in the English vocabulary to explain everything.
Wow.
So it's just like a diagram, like a engineer quality diagram of a rocket engine. It's like explodey part, like with the labels. And then What If is like one of my favorite books, which is, absurd, realistic scientific answers to absurd hypothetical questions. Like, what would happen? How would a sarlacc digest people over 150 years?
Yeah.
What would happen if you had a mole of moles in space? Like, ridiculous shit. But How To is just like how to do things. And they're pretty interesting because like it starts off very obvious. Like one of them's how to dig a hole.
Yeah.
And like it moves to increasingly complex.
How do you dig a hole?
Ways of digging holes.
Oh, okay.
It's like shovel. It's like this, and he moves on. And he's talking about like treasure hunting, and he talked about like the depth of hole that it would be worth of. Like you should just get a job digging holes if the treasure is not worth this much money because you would make more per hour.
I mean, you don't know what the treasure's worth, though.
Yeah. But he talks about the money hole and things of that. He talks about how to fill a pool and like, but it gets increasingly ridiculous. Like, so it's like order a pool. Like, well, you can get a 32 pack of bottled water from Amazon for this amount of money. So if you order this many packets of bottled water and use a machete to chop them open to increase your speed, you could fill a pool in this amount of time. Like the fastest way to build a pool. Like, yeah. And so it just gets increasingly ridiculous. Like, how do you change a light bulb by attaching drones to your feet?
Well, obviously.
Is on the cover. So, like all Randall Munroe stuff, it's got pretty interesting science behind it, even though it's utterly ridiculous in its base premise. So, I recommend it.
Okay, cool. I kind of want to borrow that one or did you get that from the library?
No, I have it.
Okay, yeah, I'll check it out when you're done. Actually, I have another book myself, Japanese Video Game Obscurities. This was a Kickstarter book from Hardcore Gaming 101, and it's just a list of games that never made it to America, and a lot of times for good reasons, because there's some weird shit that Japan made for itself.
Japan?
Yeah.
No,
like... you're playing monsters in a post-apocalyptic Earth, but aliens invade, and so you have to do traditional dungeon-crawling RPG things until you find out this actually isn't Earth. You're in hell, and you're trying to ascend to heaven, and you're not monsters. You're people who have been reincarnated as monsters, and you have to, like, karmic get to heaven kind of thing.
So a Japanese game.
It's a very Japanese thing. Another one where you're a man and a woman going around the world trying to collect 2 of every animal before a meteor destroys the planet, and you're putting them in an ark, and Hitler's involved, and you have to kill him. I mean, you have nothing to say to that.
Honestly, that you're killing Hitler is the least Japanese thing in that sentence.
There's a lot of weird games. They're very interesting. They each little essay about them has photos or screenshots of them, actually, so you can see what the graphics were like. Covers all ages from the Famicom all the way to the PS2 or 3 or something like that. So I found it quite interesting. So do you have any more shout outs?
I've been reading Kirkman's comic Oblivion Song. I quite like it. It's a very gameable premise. I forget the exact city, but like there is this horrific interplanal merging of
like you do.
Yeah, that like wipes out like 10 square miles of a city, like just as it just forcibly merges with a different fungal dimension with all these terrifying like different creatures. And the premise is not that happening. It is the guy who's trying to keep a private charity group funded to go over there and rescue the people. So basically there's a bunch of people who were missing as a result of this horrible disaster that no one knows how it happened. And there's a giant wall of all the dead. But he insists that they're not all dead. People are over there surviving in desperate straits because, they're eating fungal creatures and trying not to be eaten by them and trying to survive in an alien environment.
So a bit Annihilation kind of vibe.
Well, he's figured out how to actually do the travel safely without merging the planes. And so what he does is he goes over there and tries to send people back, but like they're basically feral. Like they've been surviving for 3 years in this utterly hostile chaos. And you have to protect yourself because like there's all sorts of weird spores. And so he's got to dress up like a sort of like cyberpunk guy. And like, so basically what ends up happening is that as his organization gets less and less funded and he can send less and less people over there, and they're over there longer, and so it's more difficult to find people, he ends up hunting them like with darts that send them back in dimensions. So he ends up hunting these people, and then like he and his 2 assistants have to like wrestle and subdue them as they freak out when they get back in reality, and then they have to try but like everyone thinks that everybody's over there dead, so he keeps on going over to try and bring people back, and then he'll like get arrested because he always goes to the memorial wall and chisels out the name of the people he rescued to remind everybody that they just gave up on them. But it gets increasingly, intrigue, and there's a lot of interesting stuff in addition.
Is this a ongoing series or is it complete?
Ongoing. Okay. And there's, they find a society of the survivors, and like there's new weird monster things all the time. But like it mainly focuses on like how shitty it is to run a nonprofit in a world that won't give you funding. Like, at the beginning of it, it's like crazy, gonna go hunt people in the other dimension guy. One woman who's a scientist who's like using all the samples he brings back to try and get medical grants and stuff. And then a guy he rescued like a couple years ago. Oh, so who is the husband of the scientist, and he's still like horrifically traumatized and scarred. And like they're the only people working there. Like they work out of a bunch of disused storage units in the middle of a desert, in the middle of the void. Because like the rotations of the planets are the same. So like when you drop down like exactly where you're at in the other place. And so like there's all sorts of issues where like they're 15 feet up in the air in the other world because like they're on some giant mushroom, and so they end up plummeting to the ground. Like hurting themselves. Or they're like, we can't transfer back here because we'd be underground and we would die. Like, so it's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Wow, interesting. How long has this been going on?
There's 3 volumes out on graphic novel form. I'm not getting it in comic book shops, but yeah, I like it. It's like it's better than Outcast. I like it more than Kirkman's other stuff lately.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm very intrigued by it. So yeah, I'll have to check it out. My last shout out is a Netflix series that has not gotten much or any publicity as far as I can tell, but it's Medical Police. It's a sequel to the Adult Swim show, A Children's Hospital, with Rob Corddry and a bunch of his friends. And basically it goes from Children's Hospital, and then 2 of the characters also become cops as well as being doctors, and they have to fight bioterrorists around the world. And it's got the same level of humor where like my favorite gag is like, oh no, we got the files we need, and now we need to jump from this balcony onto, oh look, there's a truck below with a mattress on it. And then they just fucking face plant on the ground. It's like, oh god, it hurts. And they're just limping. And yeah, no, it's if you like that Adult Swim brand of live action humor, it's the exact same thing. But Netflix money, baby. And yeah, no, I like it. So it's
Children's Hospital was A+ show.
Exactly. So yeah, watch Medical Police. 3D printers are used to make viruses now.
Of course.
Yeah, why not? Yeah. So, anyways, this has been episode 174. I am at Ross Payton on Twitter. You are
at HeavenOnGCal.
Yeah. Also, don't forget to check out nightclerkradio.com. We'll have links in the show notes. And also, if you want to help support Role Playing Public Radio, be sure to go to patreon.com/rppr, where you can back and get bonus podcasts, artwork, join our Discord. You can chat, ask us questions, and it helps keep this podcast going. So and those of you who are patrons, we deeply thank you for your support. And of course, we'll be seeing you at Origins and Gen Con this year. Yeah, thank you. We'll talk to y'all later.
Bye.